Welcome to Whiskey Noobs. Today, we are doing Better Than Eagle Rare Part 2. So, here's what I have to say. If you have not listened to episode, 178, the last episode of this podcast, go listen to that first, please. There will be spoilers. There will be things in that episode that I'm about to talk about, like real soon. Turn this off. If you're running over to your phone to click pause, I'm going to delay you just a couple more seconds. Do it. Click pause. Go back to the other episode. Okay. You've been warned. So at this point, it's on you. So we're doing Better Than Eagle Rare Part 2 because in the last episode, we did try some fantastic bourbons, and we found one that was pretty close, but we didn't find any bourbons that are better than Eagle Rare. And what I mentioned in that last episode was that I kind of came up with the bottles that we tasted by going around, and I thought, well, this is similar in age, this is similar in proof. I went through and I tasted a few different ones, and I was like, these seem pretty close to Eagle Rare. And I think I tried my best, but clearly I was off. And we even mentioned in the blind tasting, like, well, this one, which ended up being the Eagle Rare, this tastes like noticeably different. So we're doing it again. I'm still on a mission to find something better than Eagle Rare, or at the very least, out of the 6 challengers that I will have tasted by the end of this episode, whatever's the best, whatever's the closest to Eagle Rare, and maybe it's cheaper, and so it's fine that it's not quite as good as Eagle Rare. That's fine. So that's kind of what we're going to do today. This time, I consulted the internet. I did not just go through and pick some whiskeys. I thought, let's see what the folks on the internet have to say. So I started with Reddit. I moved to just Google AI. Like if you just Google it, what does Google AI pull together and take from other articles and things like that. And we've got a few challengers that I think are going to be pretty solid. So here's what we've got. We've got, in no particular order. By the way, I set up the blind tasting before I even set up the camera because I was like, when I do this on camera, I have to go through and cut it out, and it's just more editing that I'm like, why am I doing that? So the blind tasting is set up, but the 4 bottles that are in front of me here are not in any particular order because I don't know what order the glasses in front of me are in. So I don't want you to think, oh, the leftmost glass is the leftmost bottle. That's not the case. I have no idea what order these glasses are in. I even spun them twice, and some people aren't going to believe me no matter what I do, so I just did it off camera. So today we've got Evan Williams Single Barrel. This I'm 99% sure is only available in Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken. But you can get it if I'm not mistaken. Hopefully I'm not. But this was a favorite on Reddit, and so I just so happened to have a bottle, and I was like, let's do it. So this is 86.6 proof. It is their single barrel put in oak in 2005 or 2015, my bad, which I think made it 8 years old at the time that I bought it because it was in 23. So roughly 8 years old, something like that. So this should be a good contender according to Reddit. That's why we picked it. Then we've got Middle West, Middle West Spirits Straight Wheated Bourbon Whiskey. This was recommended by Google's AI, and I actually realized that I did a video before where I compared it to Eagle Rare, and I thought it was like relatively close. So I was like, hey, let's try that one. And I also love Middle West bourbon, if you don't know that already. It is a wheated bourbon, so it's interesting that it tastes somewhat similar, apparently. We're going to find out. But I do think it has similar notes to it, so we're going to give that a shot. Then we've got Cooper's Craft 100 proof. Now, this is a funny one as well because this is a Reddit find. Everybody on Reddit was recommending it. And it was also a video that I did before where I did this blind tasting with Eagle Rare, and I forgot that I even made this video. It was Long-Haired Chris. If you've been around for that long, you know I used to have hair below my shoulders. And it was a video that I made blind tasting a bunch of different ones, and that was also in that video. So I saw them on Reddit. The Reddit thread was actually from before I ever made that video, and so I was like, hey, all right, we're on to something. So I thought if Reddit liked it and I liked it, let's try a blind tasting of it. So those are our contenders today. It has been a couple of days since I did the blind tasting with Bryce. I'm hoping that Eagle Rare is not noticeably different enough that I figure out which one it is. My goal, it's so hard to do this in blind tastings. My goal is to just not even think about which is which, just focus on the qualities of the bourbon. That can be really hard to do because you naturally just want to be like, oh, I bet this one's the Eagle Rare. Oh, no, I bet this one's the Eagle Rare. It's natural, to try to guess. And so I'm going to try to not do that. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But everything is already scrambled, as I said, so we're going to dive right into it. But first, I do want to mention the proofs of each of them. So we've got the Evan Williams I mentioned was 86.6 proof. Cooper's Craft Barrel Reserve is 100 proof, and I don't think they have an age statement on it, but I could be wrong. I don't see an age statement. It's not readily apparent if there is an age statement. Middle West Spirits, I don't think age states theirs, but it is 95 proof. So we got a lot in that 85 to 100 range. And then, of course, Eagle Rare is 90 proof. So it's kind of like right there in the middle of a bunch of these, which means I think that we're going to have a really hard time telling which is which. Because if you've got like 120 versus 90, you notice. But if you've got like a bunch of really small increments, it becomes really hard to notice the proof. So hopefully that makes this blind enough. I do have some questions for the end of the podcast, so I'm not going to put my laptop completely away. But hopefully that is at least mostly out of your view. I'm going to jump up and see if it is out of your view, and then we're going to do our gut reaction tasting. If you're new here, when I do my blind tastings, I like to do that. Well, hopefully you're not new here because you listened to the last episode, right? So before I spoiled everything, you listened to 178. But what I do typically is I go through and I do like a knee-jerk reaction. Like, this one's great, this one's terrible, that sort of a thing. Maybe I pull like the major notes from it, something to remember it by. Like, this one tastes like oak and caramel, which is, a very basic answer. But you get what I'm saying. Then I go through and I do like a comparison. So I do like, okay, A and then B, A and then C, A and then D, that sort of a thing. And then I go through for one last round of tasting, and I do individual in-depth tastings. So this is now like just the in-depth, here's what I think this one tastes like. And that is usually how I carry out my blind tastings. And I will come, in between each of those rounds, I'll come back and explain what I was tasting, my initial thoughts. I like to see how over the course of the podcast, my opinion changes a little bit. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to make sure my laptop's not super duper in view or blocking anything, and then we're going to do some tasting. I almost feel as though I'm being punked. First of all, I forgot to mention the first step. I mentioned all the different tastings that I do. The thing I do before those tastings, I do an in-depth nosing of each of them to establish kind of the differences, the major characteristics of each of them. So I went through, but the reason I feel like I'm being punked is when we were doing this with Bryce, the ones on my left they were like distinctly oaky, and the ones on my right were distinctly fruity, and that has somehow weirdly happened again. It makes me like, is this like a subconscious thing happening right now? So we're going to be very critical of these as we go through to make sure that's not what's happening. But here's what I smell. This is all just on the nose. Let's start on my right because I like to go in that order for you guys. So we're going to I realize doing 1, 2, 3, and 4 doesn't make a lot of sense when you're ranking them in first, second, third, and fourth. So instead, we're going to go A, B, C, and D. A is on my right, which should be your guys' left, which should make the most sense intuitively if I'm picturing this correctly in my head, if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube, just picture it in your head. So A is very bright, very fruity. It has a cracked pepper, something with a little spark to it that adds a little something. B is very bright and fruity, very sweet, candy, dried fruit, maybe even not dried fruit, like maybe even peaches. If I had to guess right, I said I wasn't going to do this. Why am I doing this? Well, I already halfway. I don't want to just taunt you guys. So if I had to guess, this is the Eagle Rare. Hopefully I'm wrong. We'll see. And then C and D are both oaky. C is bright vanilla oaky. D is dark dusty oaky. So two different kind of takes on oaky, but both oaky nonetheless. So like I said, I'm trying not to guess what these are, but I'm guessing. It's so hard not to do. If you've done blind tastings at home, you know. So let's go through and do some tasting. I'm going to go through do the gut reaction tasting first, come back up for air. Maybe I'll change my mind about what is what because sometimes the nose does not match the palate. We'll see. Okay, this was a pleasantly surprising first round. I was a little worried because we've got some less expensive bottles here, which I should have probably mentioned in the beginning. Middle West Spirits, I want to say $40, which is real close, like kind of hand in hand with Eagle Rare. I think Eagle Rare is $36, but I'll Google it and let you guys know. Actually, you know what? Let's just Google these each as we go. So I want to talk about the prices first, and then we will go into the tasting notes that I just got. But the reason that I bring this up is I was actually like pretty impressed. I was like, these are pretty baller, which I knew I liked each of these. The Evan Williams single barrel I've honestly barely had, so I didn't know how much I was going to like that. But Cooper's Craft 100, if you've been around for any amount of time, you know I'm a huge fan of it. Middle West Bourbon. I mean, I literally went to do a barrel pick from Middle West, and we're doing Old Elk instead, but we might come back and do Middle West again. The reason I went there is because I love it so much. So there's no secret these are fantastic, but I was really impressed by them. So, MSRP of Evan Williams single barrel. I think it's a little bit pricier. Whoops, not single barrels, plural. Evan Williams single barrel, $40. Oh, that's actually not too bad. Okay, so we've got Evan Williams single barrel at $40. And maybe only available in Kentucky. Still unclear to me. Then we've got Cooper's Craft 100 proof. Let's find that. $34. Then we've got Middle West Spirits. Not the single barrel bourbon. We just want the bourbon. Come on now. I think it's going to be $40 though. I'm like 99% sure. Straight wheat whiskey. OHLQ can be really difficult to search sometimes. Why am I not seeing it? Well, either way. The rye is $40, so I can almost guarantee you the bourbon is $40 without knowing for sure. Okay. And then we've got Eagle Rare. Eagle Rare. Not 17-year-old, just Eagle Rare. And that is, it's $43 now in Ohio? Wow, I'm actually surprised by that. It used to be in the 30s for sure. So we're actually looking at some cheaper options compared to Eagle Rare. And I will say, I am impressed by how they are holding up. These are pretty good options. So here's what I've got. A on my right, the furthest to my right. A is very bright and sweet with extra complexity, a little bit of a kick, a little bit of a black pepper. There's kind of a lot going on. It's got a little bit of a sour candy, less of like a sweet candy, but really nice. Whereas you go to B has a very sweet flavor to it. Like I said, this is the one that I think is the Eagle Rare. But when you put it next to A, you kind of realize that it falls just a hair flat in terms of it's not quite as bright and exciting. It's kind of just sweet. Almost like, well, how do I put this? If you've ever just tasted simple syrup, which is a mixture of sugar and water, where it's like sweet, but it's not like candy because there's nothing else going on with it. Or just like a candy that doesn't have a huge amount of flavor. It's more so sweet. I'm trying to think of an example of such a candy. Kind of like honey, like, you know how honey, if you've ever had a candy made from honey, like honey candies, they're like very sweet and there is a flavor to them, but there's not as much flavor as like blue raspberry or even like Swedish fish, like something like that. Kind of in that ballpark. Now, that's not to say it's not delicious and it could definitely still win this. I'm not going to write it off just because I think it's Eagle Rare. I could be wrong about that. But that is kind of the comparison that I drew there. C, there we go. C is surprisingly tasty. I on the nose, it was like a little lackluster. On the palate, it had like way more going on. I haven't even really nailed it down. It's very classic bourbon-y to me. It has some of the sweeter, lighter bourbon notes like the vanillas and the caramels and a little bit of an oak backbone, but not a lot of times when you get those lighter bourbon notes, you get like a harshness with them or like a youngness to them. This doesn't seem to have that. This has like a depth and a boldness, so that's really nice. D, definitely the most oaky and dark oaky, but still a little bit exciting, still a little bit of black pepper. This leans more towards the tannin and the oak. This would be the closest to like a, what was it that we did last episode? Russell's Reserve 10-year. If I had to, well, why do I keep saying if I had to guess? This is terrible. I already have in my head what each of these are, and I could be completely wrong about them. I hate that I do that. I can't stand that I do that. But okay, so if I had to guess, I'll throw myself out there. I think that A is Middle West. I think that B is Eagle Rare. I think that C is probably the Evan Williams, and I think that D is the Cooper's Craft Barrel Reserve. If I was forced to guess, and I could still be totally wrong about those. Those are from my first gut reaction tasting. So the next step, as mentioned, is to go through and compare them all to each other. Do lots of backs and forths and see what I think about each of them. This is one of those tastings. I think it's because I've done lots of blind tasting this week that just is so fruitful. I feel like I'm learning a lot about these whiskeys, which I love. So here's where we're at. So A is almost what I would call a a more complex, intense version of B. So you kind of have to talk about A and B in a pair. B is like that sweet, simple fruity. A is like a complex, punchy fruity. And I think whichever you like more is honestly, truly going to come down to your preference. I think that A, for me, speaks more to my personality because it is a little punchier. It is a little bit more going on. So that is really interesting. They're almost two different sides of the same coin. They remind me of each other a lot. I think the fruit in A is a little bit more dark red, and the fruit in B is a little bit more light, almost stone fruit. But I think they're very similar. I think if A is the dark cocktail cherries, B is maraschino cherries. Or I think maraschino makes dark cocktail cherries. But you know what I mean? Those bright red ones. Something like that. Then I think C, I'm a little bit less impressed with it when I put it next to other ones. Here's why. I think it's really nice and approachable and almost simple in a great way. Kind of like how I like Michter's. I think Michter's is really nice because it just does simple, good bourbon very well. C reminds me of that, but when I taste everything else and then I jump over to C, there's a distinct bitterness. It reminds me of like, I don't even know how I would know what this tastes like or smells like or what. It evokes the image of wet paper in my head. Like that's what it reminds me of. Kind of like licking an envelope. You know I use that term a lot. It's kind of that way. And then D is it has a bitterness to it as well, but it's so much more punchy in a good way, I think is the word that I'm looking for. It's like punchy in a good way that distracts from that harshness a little bit. Whereas C, as I mentioned, it's kind of simple sweet, light oak, that sort of a thing. And so it doesn't distract from it as much. Now, I still don't think it has the youngness factor that I was mentioning before that it didn't have, but it has a filmy sort of a bitterness to it. So not quite young, because like young to me is like gives off a vodka tastes. It doesn't really have that as much as it has like a weird kind of bitter thing going on. So far, if I had to rank them, I would go A, B, D, C. America's Best Dance Crew. If you used to watch that show, I had I think a friend or a sibling that used to watch that show. I forget, but it was a fun show. So it was A, B, D, C. But anyhow, I digress. I think that's where I'm at, and I think that I'm scared that A versus B is because of my own internal bias. I'm really trying to separate myself from that with the fact that I thought that B off the cuff was Eagle Rare, because I could be wrong, and it could be A, and Eagle Rare could have a bit more body to it than I remember. So that's where I'm like really trying to separate myself from the bias. So what I'm going to do in this last tasting, which is what I always do, is I do very in-depth of each one. And really try to come up with, what I think I might try to do this time around is come up with a rating out of 10, which I am borrowing from Brandon at Whiskey Weather. He's awesome, and he does a rating scale that I was like, I should probably come up with a rating scale. And he does that so that it separates that bias. It goes, let me just look at this specific glass, and out of 10, how much do I like it? So I'm going to try to do that. Now, obviously, I haven't developed my rating scale, so this is more so just off the cuff. But I think it's going to be helpful, and that's what I'm going to try to do. And I'm going to start at my left. So I'm going to start at D so that I can give A and B some time away to not think about them so much. With that, I think we're going to have a really good decision. I took extensive notes. So here's what we got. We're going to go from D to A because that's the order that I tasted them in. So, D. I went through, I did nose, palate, finish out of 10. So, D, I put 6 on the nose because and I tried to keep these as objective as possible. So, I tried not to talk about specific notes or things like that. I tried to talk about, like, quality, the quality of it. So, For D, I got the nose at 6 out of 10. It's tasty, but it's got a little bit of harshness to it. Maybe tasty is the wrong word for a nose, but you get what I'm saying. It's pleasant, but then there's like a little bit of harshness overtone. The palate, I went with 5 out of 10 because I said it has nice, bold flavors, but some of that harshness from the nose carries over. So that harshness actually made it like a little bit less desirable even than the nose. Finish, I went 3 out of 10 because on the finish, it kind of moves towards harshness again. So like from nose to finish, it slowly drifts towards that kind of harsh oak. Still very good. And my thought with this was like a 7 is going to be like very exceptional. A 5 is going to be, I'm trying to like include all price ranges here. So like a 5 would not necessarily mean it's bad. It would mean this is what I would expect from almost like a daily sipper, not like a special occasion, not even like a slightly nicer, but like one of those bottles you keep on your shelf and you might mix it, you might not mix it. That's kind of what a 5 is for me right now in this scale that I just made up in the past couple minutes. So then C, I have the nose at 7 out of 10. I said really nice, but a little bit one-dimensional. So it's a little bit simple, but I mean just enjoyable. Like one of those where I'm like, if this was a candle, I would smell that candle all day long. Really, really nice, exceptional nose. Palate drops down to a 4 out of 10 because it's got really nice flavors, but the bitterness of the palate kind of ruins the palate for me. There is that bitterness, that bitter film, and I did 4 out of 10 on the finish for the same reason. B, I put the nose at 7 out of 10. Really nice, a little bit too much alcohol. I mean, in the price range that we're in, I wouldn't expect much more than that, but I'm trying to incorporate all price ranges. So palate, I have at truly exceptional, 7 out of 10, just a slight tinge of a bitterness. And then finish, I have at 5 out of 10 because I noticed on this last tasting, that's where that bitter film that I talked about really comes through. So that's where it kind of gets a little flat and simple. And then A, I had at 7.5 out of 10 for the nose. It was complex, it was sweet, it was dark, but it might just, I kind of want a little bit more oomph from it. I kind of want to jump out of the glass a little bit more towards me. The palate I had at 6 out of 10 because I wish it had a little bit more body and a little bit more sweetness, but overall really tasty. And then I had the finish at 5 out of 10 as well because this also moved towards the slightly bitter, not as bitter as B, but also a little bit spicy. Also a little bit of like a youch, a little bit on the finish. So if you're keeping score, that puts D at a combined score of 6 plus 5 is 11 plus 3 is 14. That puts, did I say D? I meant D, 14. C is at 14 as well. No, 15. Yes, C is at 15. B is at, quick math here, 19. And A is at 18 and a half. I knew A and B were really, really close. 11, 18 and a half. So B wins by half of a point. And I would honestly say, I was trying to be so objective with this, but if I was going to be subjective, I personally think I'd pick A. It's more in my wheelhouse. It's got a little bit more punch going on, but that is kind of, like I said, that's subjective. I think B, I'm trying so hard to be careful with what I say here, but I think B is objectively a little bit better. I also think it's the Eagle Rare most likely. So I was trying so hard to not think about that and just be subjective. So let's go through and do some revealing. So in last place, we had D. I think, I just realized that C and D switched spots in that last one. I ended up liking C a little bit more. I think because that nose is just so nice. So last place, we've got D. Evan Williams Single Barrel. Wow, I actually thought it was going to be the Cooper's Craft Barrel Reserve. So then, the one that just about tied it, we've got, oh my gosh. Wow. C is Middle West Spirits. I am floored by that because I always knew I loved Cooper's Craft Barrel Reserve, but I did not know I liked it this much. This is amazing. Then we've got B, or no, let's go in order of winner. We're going to do the winner last. So A, which was second place, just barely. Cooper's Craft 100 proof. Man, I've been saying for so long how much I love that bottle. I love seeing it come so close to first place. then that means that our winner by half a point is still Eagle Rare. But, subjectively, I think I'd pick the Cooper's Craft. I'm floored that Cooper's Craft beat Middle West Spirits. Let me do one more quick tasting of those two. I can't deny that there's a little bit of a film bitterness to the Middle West there. And also, I will show you on the video version, this bottle's getting pretty low. Maybe that's my indicator to smoke through it here pretty quickly because maybe it's a little old. I don't know for sure. And I don't want to make excuses for it, but that is a possible factor at play here. Cooper's Craft is not low at all. Evan Williams, not low at all. And Eagle Rare is getting there. It's not quite to the halfway point yet. But that's, if I had to make an excuse for it, that's the excuse that I would make. So maybe I need to I kind of want to now, what I might do is get a new bottle of Middle West and blind taste it against this old bottle. I think I might actually genuinely do that. I'm going to set this aside so I don't forget to do that. But that's all for the tasting portion of this episode. We're going to dive into just a couple of questions very quickly. But I am actually okay with how this worked out. I am pretty impressed by how Cooper's Craft, especially for how much cheaper it is than the Eagle Rare. I'm pretty impressed with it. Maybe as one last blind tasting, not on the podcast, but just quickly, I might do Cooper's, Eagle Rare, and the Wilderness Trail that came close to Eagle Rare last time, since I didn't really do a rating scale that time. I'd be really curious how that works out. But this definitely, this, like I said, was a fruitful tasting where I was like, wow, I can't believe what I'm tasting here. So let's dive into a couple questions. Let me grab my laptop. Just 2 questions, I think, from the Patreon today. So once again, if you join the Patreon page, any tier, you can submit questions to be submitted on the podcast. And I might actually, maybe I'll cut this out, I don't know. I might be adding a even lower tier for those who just want to show a little bit of support, which I absolutely greatly appreciate. I realize that for me, it's not in my budget to join many Patreons at all. And so I thought, well, I might put a slightly lower tier, lower in terms of price tier, and I should say more affordable. I got to get better at my marketing, but I might do a more affordable tier. And I will include Q&As in that one as well. That'll probably be like the only benefit that tier gets, most likely. I haven't decided yet. It'll just be like more of a general support, and then you can also submit questions tier. So let's dive in. So once again, these questions come from the Patreon page, and you can get a lot of really cool stuff if you join the Patreon. That would mean a lot to me if you really enjoy this content. Like I said, any tier. Honestly, even joining the free tier of the Patreon is helpful. Of course, the paid tiers are what are keeping the lights on, keeping my actual lights legitimately on and helping me pay my bills. But also, the free tier is helpful because I can help inform you on things coming up like barrel picks, things like that. So please consider going and checking that out. I'll put it in the description down below. Okay, I'm off my soapbox now. Question number 1. What is the perfect palate condition for a whiskey tasting? Do you eat first? Do you not eat? Do you drink water? The answer is typically to be well hydrated and not have eaten yet. But that said, you got to be really careful because, of course, that makes it really easy to become intoxicated. You also don't want to hold off eating like all day, and you also don't want to drink in the morning. So, you got to be really careful. But I prefer to do my tastings before I have eaten or before I have eaten anything too intense. And I usually spit out my tastings like I did this whole tasting. So I might have cut out the spitter that I was using, but I do use a spittoon when I do these. So that's the best condition. Stay nicely hydrated. And I would say definitely the person that asked this even mentioned, I know to avoid spicy food, but for those who don't, avoid spicy food 100%. And even lean towards bland if you know you got an important tasting coming up. So as an example, when I just recently went and did a barrel pick, ironically, at Middle West Spirits, on the way there, that barrel pick's probably not out yet, by the way, for those who are wondering. I should have led with the answer to that question, which is it's not out yet. So join the free tier of the Whiskey Noobs crew and you can know about it. But anyhow, I purposefully did not eat anything spicy that whole day. I tried to avoid spicy most of the week, although sometimes I'm bad about that. I kind of forget. And then on the way down, we stopped for lunch, and I made sure I didn't get anything spicy. We ended up at Wendy's, so there's not a lot of spicy stuff there. But there was a Taco Bell nearby, which I was tempted to be like, maybe we should go to Taco Bell. But I didn't because I'm like, I don't want anything spicy right now. But yeah, but also just not spicy, but also as bland as you can do. Not over salting, not over peppering, etc. Okay, that's probably way more information than you needed about what palate condition, but that's the honest answer. Next, the best smelling whiskey/bourbon candles. I actually don't have an answer for this other than excuse me, other than most whiskey/bourbon scented things don't really smell like whiskey or bourbon, including flavored things like bourbon barbecue sauce, stuff like that. They don't really usually taste very bourbony to me. So I don't have an answer for a candle, but I will say I like the smell of Bath & Body Works, like whiskey and bourbon stuff. I get gifted that kind of a lot, and I think it smells great. I really enjoy it. So I don't have any issue with that, but I just don't think any of that stuff really smells like whiskey or bourbon. I think the best smell, if you can turn this into a candle, you'll become a zillionaire. Probably not, but I'll buy it off of you, is the smell of walking into a rick house or a rack house or a warehouse where they store all the barrels for aging. That smell is just unreal. So if you could ever successfully make that into a candle, that would probably sell like hotcakes. I know for sure I would be one of your loyal customers. But yeah, I don't really have any candles to recommend, so I apologize if that's a little lackluster of an answer, but I've never come across one where it really smelled like whiskey or bourbon, like in a pleasant, non-alcoholic way. Even in an unpleasant alcoholic, like even something that was just overly accurate, I haven't really come across. So that's my answer to that question. Those are all the questions that we've got for today. So without further ado, I don't want to take any more of your guys' time. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Whiskey Noobs. I will leave you with learn to drink, drink to learn. Hi there. Since you're still here, I'm going to assume that you enjoyed the show, in which case, please just take a moment to leave a 5-star rating or review on whatever platform it is that you get your podcast from. Subscribe to the podcast because that actually really helps out. And also, if you're on YouTube, ring that notification bell. If you really like this show, though, the best way that you can support it is just checking out that Patreon page. It's at the description in the show notes or in the description on YouTube, or you can go to patreon.com/whiskeynoobs. That is the absolute best way to support the show, but also just spreading the word to other people who you think might be interested. I am so grateful for all of the forms of support that you guys give. And please, 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 most importantly, always drink responsibly. Thank you guys all so much. And in case nobody else tells you today, I got to tell you, God bless.